Hello, ladies and a few good men, and welcome to another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast, where, as always, you can access previous episodes and show notes online at autoimmunerehab.com. And today's episode is a solo episode with your host, Anna Mara Brown, who can't ever get enough of dark chocolate, avocados, and, of course, fun and cuddly puppies and dogs. So, welcome to today's episode. In today's episode, I'm going to talk with you about what I consider to be the 10 worst foods for Hashimoto's. And by the way, I might add that it's not just me saying this. These are partly based from my own experience with healing and with putting my Hashimoto's more or less into remission, but also these are foods that are talked about by a lot of other health coaches, nutritionists, and doctors as really not being good for you when you have Hashimoto's. Now, that said, as you start to heal your body, you may be able to get to a point where you can start eating some of these things. But these are things that really, in the beginning, you probably will need to give up most, if not all of them in the beginning. Okay, so let's start with the first one, which is the real bear here, which is sugar. And a lot of us, I think, consume a lot more sugar than we realize, and we also may not even be aware of the impacts that sugar have on us. And I personally, gave up a lot of the big culprits of sugar, if you will. Like I quit eating sweets, anything, candy, cakes, cookies, things that had a ton of sugar in them a few years ago, but more recently started expanding that to really giving up any kind of things like dressings, ketchup, syrups, really anything that has more than I would say 1 gram of sugar. So it means basically with 1 gram of sugar, there's very little in it. It's not going to be something that's sweet. Even ketchup, most kinds, has more sugar in it than, a lot of candy bars. And a lot of people sometimes aren't aware of that, but it really does. And I still occasionally will have like some honey maple syrup, stevia, fruit sugar, that kind of thing. So I'm not really referring to that kind of sugar. I'm really referring to more like your cane sugar, white sugar, brown sugar, the actual sugar. And I personally have noticed by doing this that I have a lot less knee pain, a lot less inflammation, and I just feel better all around. So I would say that sugar really is something that you should either give up 100% or really only enjoy maybe, for your birthday or a special holiday every once in a while, and really do what you can to eliminate 99% of sugar from your diet if you really want to feel better. Then the second one is the other big bear that really has a big impact on a lot of people with autoimmune challenges, and Hashimoto's is no different, and that is gluten. And I know some of you may be thinking, oh, but I don't have celiac, so, but the reality is that a lot more doctors nowadays are starting to tell people that anybody with any kind of autoimmune condition should not have gluten. And I've personally been pretty strictly gluten-free for more than 10, going on almost 11 years now. And it's really had a big impact on my health. I've been accidentally glutened a few times, like most people are, with eating out and whatever, and have to say that it really does a number on me if I accidentally get it. So I really recommend being really strict with this one for at least a year or two till you know how your body will respond, and probably doing a celiac test before if you can, because I actually made the mistake of not doing this and now I don't know if I'm actually really celiac or not. I think I actually could be potentially, but I don't know that, and in some ways it would be nice to have that information. So I recommend that. And then after a while, maybe, if you feel like you can handle a small amount of gluten, you could try things like sourdough bread because of its fermentation. It typically doesn't have as big of an impact on you. I know that I have actually tried that a time or two in the last 10 years, and, I do okay with it. I don't have the effects of like, I would from other kinds of breads and things, but I still have chosen to mostly avoid even that as well. So that's something to keep in mind. The third one, which completes the big trifecta, is dairy. And I personally had to give it up for a couple years, really 100% pretty much. Now I am able to handle some butter and some hard cheeses, things like that, but it really, you really have to watch it and just really be aware. And I know that giving up sugar, gluten, and dairy can be really tough. However, I do offer the ability for you to work with me one-on-one and learn specifically strategies about how to actually make that happen, how to still have meals that you can enjoy, food that is delicious, that is simple, that isn't going to break the bank, and that kind of thing. So if you are needing some help, please reach out. Let's do a free 15-minute consultation, and then we can start helping you get on the journey to doing that. Okay. Then the next one is one that people don't often think about, but it's corn. And I personally have known that I'm pretty sure I have some allergy issues with corn because corn really can do a number on me. It can actually make any kind of seasonal allergies that I have worse, can make my hay fever worse, all kinds of things. And so I really feel like giving up corn, or at least 90% of the time giving up corn, is really a good idea. And the next one is seed oil. So seed oils would be things like primarily canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, things like that. I try to really only eat coconut oil, avocado oil, and olive oil, or any kind of chips or anything that are processed with those oils, which means you typically have to eat fewer of them, you have to pay more for them, and really search your brands because a lot of chips especially are processed with things like corn oil and canola oil and sunflower oil, safflower oil, that kind of thing, and they're just really not good for you. And so you really, really want to avoid them as much as possible, and they can also increase your inflammation and pain as well. Then the next one probably goes without saying, but processed foods. So any kind of a food that technically isn't food. Like if you could ask yourself, would my great grandmother recognize this as food? And if the answer is no, or if it has too many ingredients on the label that you can't read or understand, then you definitely don't want to do that. And we'll also put a plug in here and say that I am going to be doing a group coaching program during February and March, where we are going to be talking all about food labels and how to adequately read food labels and know what's in your food. So if you're interested in that, there will be some information on that in the show notes as well. And then soy. And this is another one that a lot of people don't think about, but soy can have a pretty big impact on your hormones. And soy is also added to a lot of things. And if you are eating more of like a vegan or vegetarian lifestyle, and maybe you're eating things like tofu that has soy in it, that's probably not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more like your processed soy sauce and some of the other types of things that have soy added into them as an ingredient. So you really, really want to try to eliminate that one as much as you can. The next one would be raw greens. Now, this is another one I want to add a caveat to, because if you do have some things like a little bit of green powder, things like that, it's probably not going to be a big deal. But when I think of raw greens, I also don't refer to salad specifically. I refer to things like raw spinach, raw broccoli, um, raw green collards, I guess, different things like that, and be really, really careful that if you consume too many of those raw greens, they can have a big impact on your goiter and your thyroid, Hashimoto's, that kind of thing. So you want to be really careful there. And the next was nightshades. And more specifically with nightshades, that includes things like potatoes, not sweet potatoes, but just regular potatoes, peppers, and tomatoes and eggplant. And a lot of these things, for various reasons, can cause some real issues with inflammation and pain in some people. I personally don't eat eggplants often enough to have really noticed a difference. It's one of those things I only eat occasionally. And then I do rotations with peppers and potatoes and tomatoes where I maybe only eat those maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks, and so they don't cause me a big problem. But you just want to be careful you don't eat them too often, especially. And in some cases, if you're having a lot of symptoms and pain, you may have to give them up for several months completely. Then the last but not least is hot spices. So this is something a lot of people don't think about. It can even include things like garlic, uh, thyme, oregano, cayenne, paprika, different things like that. Those things can sometimes be really rough in the digestive system for some people. And, if you have a Hashimoto's, then you obviously have a leaky gut and some digestive issues. And so this is another one you may not have to give up all the time, but if you eat a lot of spicy food, I challenge you to take a note of what happens after you eat a lot of those spicy foods and start maybe even keeping a diary and a symptom tracker to help you take note of what is going on after you eat those. And you may start to realize, oh, these things are causing me more of a problem than I thought they were. So let's go back through what these foods are again. And if you want to also take a note of some additional resources, you probably want to check the blog post that will accompany this podcast episode as well. And it's sugar, gluten, dairy, corn, seed oils, processed foods, soy, raw greens, nightshades, and hot spices. And so I know this is really hard, and like I said, if you really need some help and assistance, I offer free 15-minute consultation to see how we could work together and see what I could do to help you improve upon your health and well-being, help point you in the direction of some recipes, help you get going with implementing this lifestyle. So please take me up on that. Like I said, you'll find the link in the show notes. And I also invite you to go to my main page of my blog at annalaurabrown.com and download your free thyroid calendar resource that has some different hips and tints and things on how to help balance and have a better, healthier, improved thyroid. So take care. I look forward to hearing from you and to sharing with you soon on another episode of the Autoimmune Rehab Podcast.